the goal for those of you who are just jumping on, jot down notes. A couple things I would love for us to consider doing here. This is kind of the dry run of how can we make an attempt to create a reproducible training tool to allow more people around the world to use some of these tools and skills and help them grow in the understanding of some of these principles. So if you have feedback on how best to do that, obviously it'd be a lot more fun to all be in the same room somewhere, but I do think this is an interesting opportunity that's been developed in the last year or so to be able to do some of these trainings, and we'll see how it goes. I appreciate you slugging through it. If you do have a question at any point, you want to throw your hand up, and I will use the little thing. And I don't know, Nathan, maybe if you could watch that, because I'm once I start sharing my screen, everybody's faces get really small on my end, so I may not have quite the same access to your what you're looking at. But so anyway, super excited. I'm confident this is not going to be a very high quality video, but I just ask that you guys be believing God with me that somehow He'll be able to breathe on it, make it useful for the kingdom. I'm going to share my screen for most of this time. I may hit a pause after a major point, go off screen sharing, have a little discussion. We'll see how it goes. And the goal is to make sure everybody understands it to the degree they want to, and not try to slug through a certain amount of material quickly. So please don't feel like you're gumming up the works. We'll go as slow as it takes to make that happen. So anyway, again, appreciate you all jumping on, and there'll be some others joining us over the coming weeks or watching on the recorded video of this. So want to jump in. Let me do some screen sharing. So did I share with you guys yet the Google Drive folder that has all the different tools and resources in it yet? Did I share that with you?
I didn't see it, but okay. Maybe you shared it with other people.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So you will be getting a folder where a lot of the handouts and slideshows and skills tools and all kinds of things. I'm just going to throw them all in there. We're in the process of starting to build a website. Eventually that'll all be on there. So, but for now, we'll share the only way I know how to do it. Let's read one. Okay. All right. Y'all see connect?
Yep, we can see it.
I'm going to see, ooh, I may have discovered a cool thing. I can actually see share screen and all of you. This is cool. All right, that's an improvement. Zoom must have just improved something. So big idea here. The reason we're rebranding what used to be known as To Have and to Hold, with the goal primarily of making it something that does not feel inherently churchy or and really speaks to this whole understanding of what it means to live from a whole heart. And as we walk through that, so historically it's been known as the skills class, To Have and to Hold skills class. That's how we've tried to mark this, and then primarily how we've walked it out is within marriage, though we have done a lot of different things related to teens with teams. We've been able to work with some missionary teams together. We've trained all our teens, a whole group of women, older singles in this. So we've run it out in a lot of different environments, but still the primary thing that I think the primary pinch point for humans is in our marriages, and so it remains a strong access point for beginning the question. So why do we go on this journey? Why would we even want to do this? And please keep in mind, one of the things that maybe the biggest thing that is important to me about this is why I want to go slow is that we begin to build some of this understanding of conviction. That is this something significant to the way God has designed us, the way He wants us to operate, And because most marriage tools go one of two directions. They will trend towards either being really skilled at relationship, which is wonderful. I'm not sure that's God's first goal, is that we be skilled at relationship. Or the other extreme would be that it's really not about you at all. It's about God's glory and you figuring how to suffer and give him glory in your relationship, regardless of how satisfying it is. So one way is you build these kind of agreeable relationships that work for you, good communication tools, or this idea of, well, that doesn't really matter, just love each other deeply, like let God use marriage as a refinement of you. And I just don't know if either one of those really hits the target of keeping things, what I don't know how else to call it, but that we're called to be kingdom workers. So this idea that what we're doing it should be fit in the middle of the kingdom. It should represent God's heart for the nations. There's all kinds of important things that we're to be doing in marriage as couples, as the body of Christ, that require good relational skills to do well. And we'll unpack that more over the coming weeks. But that would be a big deal to me, that the kingdom is represented. This isn't just, you could use it, and you certainly could. You're welcome to take any of this, any piece of it, use it however you want. I don't have any fingerprints on it, or I won't guard it. I just want to do my best to try to persuade you to see it as much more significant than just a way of helping marriages. That there's an opportunity to impact much more than marriage stuff. So kingdom centered is, I think, a big part of that. When we're healthy relationally, when we're living wholeheartedly, then we have a much greater capacity, much bigger opportunity to be kingdom workers, to invest in the kingdom. One of the things that's, if you've done anything ever in Christendom, almost every book, they reinvent vocabulary. And so every marriage ministry, every ministry pretty much, seems like the number one job of an author, this is just my bias, my understanding, is that somehow we create new words, we create new vocabulary. And so most of us have to spend a fair amount of time just trying to filter through, well, how does that relate to this idea over here? And is it the same thing? And new phrases, new terms are getting reinvented all the time, and they probably represent an old idea. So what we're trying to do with this is create a very central common language to all things relational, so that we can support each other, we can encourage each other within churches as you may develop relational ministry, that from small group to small group or conversation to conversation, you share a common language, you share common paradigms. So it doesn't mean you can't use other tools, but you filter them back through a common language, and so we're not always reinventing that. So the language of love and respect is different than how we love. It's different than the language. There's just all these marriage things, Enneagram. Everybody's got their own definitions, and it's really hard to cooperate and to reproduce anything because there's so much diversity of language. This one is huge for me, is the ability to reproduce it. My best understanding about our missiology, what God has asked us to do as his people, the church, is to bring his kingdom to every nation on the earth, every ethne. And to do that based on the earth and all of the people groups in it, if we can't draw the concepts in the dirt with a stick, without a PhD or an MDiv, if we can't do it without all that, then we will never reach the world. It's too diverse, it's too broad, there's places they don't even have written language. And so we have to figure out ways to create what it means to be a disciple, and recreate and reproduce what it means to be a disciple in ways that are simple and reproducible and manageable, and does not require higher advanced degrees to understand and to put out there. So that's part of what we've tried to do. For those of you who are historically, and I think everybody now, there's a couple that aren't, who've grown up as disciples in the M28 kind of paradigm and core values, a big part of what I tried to do is filter through a lot of what's out there and help fit it into our existing values. and make sure that it's not rubbing up against those things that we have historically held as our values. And the last thing is this: it's kind of heart-focused discipleship. It's this opportunity to invest in our inner man, our innermost being, our soul, and to make sure that's healthy. That the idea of connect, being wholehearted, living wholeheartedly, or relating wholeheartedly, is this idea we have to figure out ways to deal with what's going on in that inner man and make sure it's healthy. So here's kind of just for our understanding. I don't know how many of you have ever had the chance. I know a couple of you have looked at the Deeper Walk videos. At least the first one, he describes all the different kinds of models, from osmosis to education to whatever it might be, ways of discipling. This is part of our mission here locally, is that when we define being and making disciples, the sliders we're going to push on is we want to keep the redemption mission very clear. We're not here to create fun community. We hope that's an outcome, but our goal is to be on this redemptive mission, so that everything we're doing is training towards that completion of God's heart for the nations. That it is kingdom centered, that there is a king, that we're his subjects, that we want to make Jesus king and his rule and reign in every area of our lives. And so that idea of his kingship is pretty significant when we think about what it means to make disciples. To do that, and this has been our historical and M28 world, that the idea of be not hearers only of the word, but doers. The obedience, application-based discipleship is a pretty significant part of how we've tried to make disciples. And we share that in common with a number of significant groups around the world, not the least of which is some of the church planting movements and disciple-making movements that are currently operating where that's a primary focus. And so what they're doing resonates with us, because it is a no, do, not just know and think about it and maybe do, maybe not do. And then the fourth point is that there would be a relational outcome, and we'll talk more about why that is as we kind of build this foundation. But the relationship outcomes, what we do in all of heart-focused ministry and make disciples, is that we should increase our quality of relationships, our sense of knowing and being known. And then the final thing, we would, because a lot of that relational activity flows out of that, what the Bible calls the heart, the innermost being, the soul, all very similar ideas and similar words, similar ideas of this same place, the place we live from, in Proverbs 4. We want to make sure we're cultivating that and creating tools that help people understand what's going on in their inward motivations. And relationship is the place often that brings health. Healthy connection actually is a part of God's therapeutic tool to bring health to that part of us. So it fits right in there. So when we think about connect, there's this big idea of it's relating wholeheartely as the overall. And then there's two kind of major areas that we think about. One, it would be the soul care element. And a lot of those a number of you have been involved with transformational prayer or steps to freedom exercises or experiencing God's comfort, or all those tools. And we hope to have a good database of things that we can download on the soul care side. The reason that's become so important to Cindy and I, we didn't know that was going to be that big a deal, because we just set out trying to work on the marriage side and relationship side. But what we discovered is even people who wanted to try to connect in marriage relationships or elder teams, their conviction was to do it. They kept bumping into their stuff, and there were barriers to their connection that didn't seem to be a part of just will or relational ineptitude. It was stuff that somehow God had to touch or heal or do something with, and so that's how we really got into more aggressively some of the soul care stuff as a function of helping people connect and relate more wholeheartedly. And that was the only answer we didn't feel like we had, was when it was their stuff. And so we really feel blessed to have discovered some things with TPM and seen a lot of great progress with that. So the left one, connect marriage, actually probably could be connect relationships, because there's a number of these tools that we have models and ways of walking them out as elder teams, as parents, as friendships, roommates. But those are kind of the way it's laid out, and for you to know. Hopefully all of this is coming onto a website, so as you would want to use these resources, it'll be in a format where you can jump on there and grab a video, grab an exercise, grab a video of a teaching on what does it mean to be, you know, an instruction video on how to walk through Romans 15, emotional responding. Cindy and I are getting ready to record a bunch of modeling videos. So until you're comfortable with doing that yourself. So that's what we're hoping to do. That's why I want you to understand what Connect is and how it works together. We're going towards the goal of making that a tool that's available. And the goal of all of this, we did start, it's a DBA under Beggar's Gate, but we're just going to see if those who are senders in the kingdom want to help support missionaries. And so make all these resources so it's not an extra fee for pastors and missionaries to get help. That's our primary focus. Obviously, you guys with boots on the ground with marriages in your churches or ministries, you're going to be involved with all kinds of couples, but our personal emphasis tends to be leader couples or missionary couples, and then we want to just be able to be a resource to help others be successful in bringing it. Okay, so Connect is this commitment to heart-focused discipleship. This is how I teach this, and I think it really, really is important to set people up when you begin to try to lead them through that what we do in this ministry is not what they're used to. Even how we teach it is not exactly how they would typically, most people would typically lay out a teaching, because the goal is to take people through a whole set of experiences. So the first thing we want to try to do is explain the foundation. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why is this significant? Why is that important? By the way, in a lot of marriage tools, I don't know if we have all the right answers here, guys, but I do think we're asking the right questions. And what I perceive to be different about some of the things that God has laid in our lap is that many, even peacemakers, which is an amazing, amazing tool, they will say the goal is relationship, but the exercise itself is not necessarily relational. That's the piece that I keep running into. The Equipping Ministries International with they do listening for heaven's sake, or apples of gold. Listening, it's very similar to our assertiveness stuff, but in the middle of the exercise, in the middle of practicing the skill, it is not necessarily designed to be a connecting event. And for me, that's such an important piece of how these are tend to have a much more powerful effect, because when we can actually create connection as we're teaching verbal skill or responding skill or assertiveness skill, and we're actually experiencing connection, then we're building this bond that God designed to be very satisfying and life affirming and leading to long-term joy. So we're going to lay that foundation, explain the foundation of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then we'll walk through and teach different skills. We have 3 core skills that we'll get to that are basically emotional responding, oneness responding from Romans 12:15, assertiveness, and then confession and forgiveness. And then the 2 kind of supplementary ones that are problem solving and stress management. Those are the 5 core things that we want to teach. The 3 are the most important. And we teach all of this. We can do this in 2 hours and have this really quick flyover. We do that sometimes with pre-marriage, just 2, maybe 4 hours together, just to give them some language and understanding. Or we do a 5-week class that we walk this out. So all different ways we want to be able to range this material, and we've done it in a lot of those things. Mark, by the way, who doesn't have a last name, he's been involved with this ministry for a long time, leading small groups and helping in the Fort Collins world. He's currently working on some tools to help lead more of a small group discussion. The way we've laid that out over the last 8 or 9 years, we've got it pretty robustly out there, but he's developing some actual printable resources to kind of help somebody lead a small group and have those discussions. So then we're going to teach the skills, and those are the 5 core ones. Then we're going to demonstrate the skills. If there's anything, guys, that I would say has been repeatedly given us feedback that's been super helpful for people to understand what it looks like, is our capacity to model it. That it's really, really helpful for people. I've wondered if that's not something that Cindy and I aren't just somehow gifted by God to do well. I don't know if everybody has the same impact, but everybody can at least take the scariness out by modeling it. And in the short term, we're going to try to develop a whole bunch of modeling videos for people to use. But over time, as you can live that out in community and do that with each other as men. So then we're going to teach the skills, and those are the 5 core ones. Then we're going to demonstrate the skills. If there's anything, guys, that I would say has been repeatedly given us feedback that's been super helpful for people to understand what it looks like, is our capacity to model it. That it's really, really helpful for people. I've wondered if that's not something that Cindy and I aren't just somehow gifted by God to do well. I don't know if everybody has the same impact, but everybody can at least take the scariness out by modeling it. And in the short term, we're going to try to develop a whole bunch of modeling videos for people to use. But over time, as you can live that out in community and do that with each other as men or as women, women's events or men's events, to share joy with one another, to resolve conflict that way, you can model all kinds of those things. And in fact, when I was teaching at the Beggar's Gate, I modeled it. I modeled a number of these from the pulpit. I picked somebody out that I offended in the congregation, and I modeled it right in live time from the pulpit, just to demonstrate what that looked like. So being able to demonstrate it is pretty important. Insist they practice it. There's some practical things we'll talk about as we go through the skills, but keeping your eyes on people is a huge part of helping them be successful, especially those who might be a little more distressed. There's a good chance it's not going to go a good direction if they don't have pretty solid habits, and helping them share it in front of you or feel okay with that is a great thing to shoot for. Again, these are more of an apprenticeship style learning thing, but whenever you can, to come back and have them download how it went, share the experience, so people are learning in community. If you're doing it in a small group, if you're working with couples one-on-one, I still think it's important to give them a chance to talk about it. So if it was painful or joyful or whatever it might be, clunky, that we give them an opportunity to say, well, how did that go? How did you experience it? What was easy? What was hard? And let them talk about it. And so by doing that, if you are in a small group or a class setting, then you can learn in community from those experiences. Okay. So any questions, thoughts, feedback, anything that's you want to talk more about? Or
maybe while you guys are thinking, I just reiterate one of the resources Pat put in the email with this invitation was a book called The Other Half of Church. And it talks a lot about how most of our church experience is geared towards a very logical, class-oriented, kind of knowledge-based system. And most of how we learn anything is through relational, emotional, experiential practices and activities. And so a lot of this class starts a little bit with that foundation of the knowledge, but it's going to be really pushing for people to do, to relate, to emote, And so that's where it can be challenging and probably different than what a lot of other people put forward as far as marriage materials.
Questions, feedback, comments?
Well, I have a question if nobody else does.
Sure.
A question for everybody. What do you feel like is the greatest barrier to taking others through this presently? Would it be just knowing kind of the ins and outs and kind of the getting through understanding the whole scope of it, or would there be other barriers that you feel exist? I just love to hear what are kind of some of the harder things in front of us um, to engage with some of this material.
I know for me, and Pat touched on it, I just being far better at modeling it, like actually doing it in my own life. I think that's a big one, and probably feeling more comfortable with it, like having maybe a longer runway that I feel like I've been on to look at.
I think I can find one of the challenges is that maybe folks only come to this desire if things are really desperate. Like if you're in a really bad spot, so it's kind of like, oh, this would be good for broken people, rather than just this is these kind of skills. And I think that kind of comes back to the foundation, and then so I appreciate as we're going to dig into that, the foundation of that connection, where it's not just like, here's some things to help you if you're broken to get to a place of peace, but like this is really this is going towards the goal of the entire Christian life. The goal of connection is rooted in all of us, not just if you're, I don't know, in disease or something.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dov. That it really is for almost all of this whole idea of heart focused discipleship in Western evangelicalism. The highest value that seems to be stated in one whole camp is knowledge, information, good doctrine, good truth. In another camp, it is simply your experience, and as long as it it feels a certain way, then it's true and it's good, and the Spirit is rolling. And I'm not saying either one of those things are bad; they're both really good when you have a strong experience of God. But somehow to see this our responsibility to cultivate a depth of maturity in our soul. And I do think that book, have you seen that one? Have you been reading that one, Dov, The Other Half of Church? Have you picked that one up yet?
No, I haven't picked up. I have seen a little bit of Wilder stuff, but not that book.
Yeah, it does a really, really good job of maybe a little too much brain chemistry for most of us. I totally geek out on it, but really the sense of connection and how that brings life, and it really is a good explanation for maybe answering that question you're talking about. This isn't just for broken people. This is for people who want to live wholeheartedly, who want to be able to bring full faith without resistance, without baggage, without triggers into and building that connection. In some ways, we were just talking about this morning. Nathan and John, we had a little meeting. My goal would be that people would understand that going after our heart issue, that Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, above all, guard your heart, for out of it flows your life. That idea, that concept, that it really is it's not selfish to say, I want to grab everything God has for me. And to do that, I have to manage, I have to be able to live from an unbroken heart. I have to live from a place where he's living and filling me with all the fullness of God. And a part of that is very, very relational with humans. And again, we'll lay that foundation, but very much a lot of the soul care stuff, actually marriage things and soul care things, most people wait till it's really, really broken and painful before they'll make an investment. And then it's a lot harder. And so again, one of my ambitions would be that you see this as central to what it means to express body life, that it's normative, that these conversations are normal, and you build that culture. That's what we've been trying to build in Loveland, and to some degree, I feel like we've been able to set that. This is what it looks like to keep pursuing greater and greater heart health. This is what it looks like to be deeply connected and caring towards one another, and that's what it means to be a disciple. So it is an uphill battle, but I encourage you. I think it's one worth fighting, and to not be pushed back on so strongly that, well, if we just know more, then it'll be fine. And boy, we all know people who get themselves in really hard situations, who know the scriptures really, really well. Something is missing, and I think a piece of that is connection with God and others at a deeper level, where a lot of these things come through. So, other hard things that make it challenging for you? Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep plugging along here. So, again, thinking about when we're teaching this, what do we need to let people know what to expect? This is kind of all pre-theology even. It's just letting people know this is going to be different than what you're used to. The idea of skill versus knowledge. And I don't know how much you've thought about that, but if you have a skill, if you neglect practice, if you have a high degree of skill, if you neglect practice, it will immediately start to degrade to some level. Now, you may still be able to swing a golf club or play an F sharp minor chord, but if you were practicing it diligently, it would be easy and sound better and work better. Everything's better with practice when you're talking about a skill. Now, once you know how to play an F sharp minor, you have the information, the knowledge to do that. You could teach anybody how to do that. You could draw it on a keyboard. You could lay it all out, figure out exactly, these are the notes that are there, but it doesn't mean you can do it. And relationship is about doing, and knowing the right answer does not build connection. And so when we're talking about relational things, to put it in that context, you have to practice it. What I typically communicate, there's a phrase out there that says to be an expert at something, you need 10,000 hours of practice. And that's true if you're a world-class whatever. To be competent, to begin to have some level of proficiency and to not feel quite as clunky, it takes about 20 hours. If you pick up a guitar in 20 hours, not all at once, not 20 hours in a row, but 20 minutes a day for however many days that would be, 60 days, you just practice a few chords. At the end of that 20 hours of practice, you would go, oh, I'm making music. I can play some songs. This is kind of fun. And you can begin to feel more confident. And so it's a proficiency issue with skill. We don't have to be experts. We just have to be confident and not feel quite as clunky as when we're using new words or making our fingers do the first thing, or the first time if you have not been running and you decide to run a marathon, day one, you probably don't make it very far in your training before you go, I am gassed, I need to go home, maybe die. So the second thing is the challenge of current patterns, to realize that when you're in your own lives, even as you would set out to make changes, you're not doing things in a vacuum. You already have patterns in place, many of which are not healthy. They're avoidance or anger, or I'm shocked how many marriages of what we all, as we all sit here and look at each other, men and women in our church, we would call them leaders. How many are struggle with an anger response? And it may not even be yelling or throwing things, but it's a way to, it's a pressure that's created, a frustration, it's a toxic kind of culture that can be created through anger. All of our expectations, the way we cope with offense and conflict, all those things are in place. Most of those things for the people you're working with were in place before they even got married. That the way that they're going to cope, the way that they're going to respond to being, you know, their defensive postures probably were well formed way before they got married. And so you're undoing a lot. And if you don't let people know that, and if you don't commit to that process personally, it'll just feel overwhelming. It's like, okay, I'm going to lay on the couch and eat junk food, and then I'm gonna start, I'm swearing off carbs and sugars all completely. Your whole body goes, whoa, what? Wait a minute, hold on. There's some resistance at a physiological level, certainly an emotional level, and that same thing is true in relationships. So we want to be able to recognize and understand those patterns, and so that when we see them coming again, we can make different choices. So that's a huge part of helping people, encouraging them, and as you're coaching people relationally, is to start listening for, watching their patterns. It really doesn't take very long to become certainly not a trial lawyer quality practitioner, but to start reading all of the nonverbals that say something is going on in someone's heart. It's pretty amazing how quickly you can start picking that up. I think most of you have seen this video, and we show a video of the backwards bicycle just to illustrate once you're trying to form a new habit, the longer you've been in a pattern, the harder it is to break out of it. So that's the video that we use to try to talk that through. And so they go, knowledge is not understanding, and we would just say knowledge is not skill. So we have to retrain a skill. It requires a great deal of effort. And then and these would be the three things that we want to try to lay out for folks, is to define that conviction and that will kind of idea. This is for you guys to be wrestling with. If you're going to use it as a primary tool, and certainly for those of you who are pastoring, if you're going to think about moving this to the center of church culture, which you don't have to do, it's not dependent on using the tool. I'm just saying, if that's attractive to you, if you want to do that, then really becoming convinced, as Doug was saying, you're going to get pushback. People are going to go, I don't want to do that. Just tell me what to do. I don't want to be known. I don't want to be naked. I don't want to be vulnerable, which are all really common human reactions. So having that conviction, that will, this clear target, what is that? I have become convinced that that target for everything that God has created is connection. It's relationship. It's oneness. All those things are interchangeable in my mind. So whatever we're doing, so, okay, does that apply? Well, what about the glory of God? Well, how does God get glory? When we actually walk in oneness. And then when we do that, he shares his with us. He shares even more glory with us. So it is an outcome in terms of what we can manage, what we can pursue, and what God designed. Well, what about the gospel? What about sharing the gospel? That is an exercise in connection. It's reconnecting, reconciling God to his people that's been lost. That's what's on his heart, is to bring people back into relationship with himself. And so all personal holiness, the summary of the law is love. The primary idea is faith expressing itself in love. Those are all very relational concepts. It's how well can we connect? How well can we model? And so we want to paint that as the clear target. You have to have, if you want to go somewhere, you need to know two things. Where are you and where are you going? It's the only way you can map out a strategy. So we want to define the target. Then we go to the path. Wait a minute. Mouse move. So this is the understanding piece, and this is where we would introduce the relational language of the 10 relational needs, the 10 greatest, or the top 10 relational needs. And we'll keep reinforcing this for you, but the idea is they're not the only relational needs we have. They tend to be the ones, if we don't experience them to a fairly healthy degree, it'll start going toxic on us. We'll start forming patterns of behavior, or responding, or coping that are unhealthy and actually hinder. They'll start creating obstacles to us experiencing intimacy or oneness. And so that path of understanding is the 10 relational needs and some of the skills for collecting those. So we've got a goal, we've got a path to walk on, and then the last one is that really helping folks understand, because this is not even really a stated value for most people. I think some people intuitively understand it and pursue it, but if you say, what's important to you? You might say relationships, you might say people, you might say hanging out with friends, but this sense of feeling connected, this sense of feeling cared for, that's actually what keeps fueling joy and health and long-term sense of well-being. This is the place, and again, switching to brain chemistry, the idea that this is where oxytocin is released, that leads to that long-term sense of well-being and peacefulness and connection and joy. That's this bonding chemical that got built into our bodies to reinforce what he said was true. It's the idea of empathizing. It's rejoicing with those who rejoice, grieving with those who grieve. It's those moments of care and connection. And so to do relationship well, to hit the target, we have to start with the skill of being able to experience it in a small degree to give us hope. Otherwise, it's just too scary. So that's kind of where it rolls out. Got a target, got a path, and that's the fuel. That's what we eat. That's what keeps us going when we can feel connected and cared for. So that's kind of where I wanted to stop today, and we'll jump into some new stuff next week. But I wanted to at least lay that all out there and see how that's impacting you. What do you need? Let me ask this question: what would you need to know to teach what we just went over? What would you need to understand better to handle